You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Grant Ecker, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Grant, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm really happy to have you on the show today, and I've been looking forward to speaking to you. So today we're going to speak a little bit about, architects and architecture, and let's not. I'm not going to give anything away because I'm not an architect, so I'm going to let you do that, right, Grant? Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me on.
So, Grant, architects, won't they be replaced by Gen AI?
Some things that we do in every job are going to be replaced by Gen AI. And that's a good thing because anything that can be done and automated or improved or systematized, that's the point. Architects of all people understand that. So we look at this thing and we're afraid because it might change what's normal. It might change what we do. And I think that is one of the biggest mistakes is trying to execute through fear what we're trying to move forward. I think instead, it's what opportunities does this create for us if AI takes these things off our plate, if it makes these things easy? Because I realize this is a line that we hear over and over again, but I believe it's true. Your job isn't going to be replaced by AI. It's going to be replaced by a colleague that uses AI effectively to do their job better than you're doing.
But I think that the whole messaging around, you won't have to do this or that in the future, does that even make sense? It's not just, making people unaware what they are supposed to do. I think inaction is the worst thing, right? So messages like you won't have to do this or that in the future, isn't that just creating more inaction?
Yeah, there's this really funny advertisement from, I think it was in the UK. It was Take 5 might be the name of the product. And it was this whole idea as a candy bar of, hey, in the future, you won't have to do anything. We actually are going to send you to university to learn how to do nothing. And you just sit there and push OK buttons, right? I don't think that's going to be the reality with AI. I think it's going to be a lot more of augmentation, a lot more of the kind of things coming off your plate that might be for example, let's look at the past, because looking at the future, it's really hard for this to make sense. But we still move around the country, right? But none of us have a horse in our stable that we have to feed. We have to take to the vet. We have to get horseshoes put on. We have different things now. We drive automobiles. We have to make sure that it's been to the shop every so often. There's an entire horse economy that was reset as we went from horses to automobiles. But we still transport ourselves from A to B and actually a lot more effectively. So if you're the guy who's just clinging on to the horse culture and the horse economy, you're probably not going to be very thought-provoking, very thought-leading in the car world. Well, the same is true in AI, and especially true with architects, because we are supposed to be the thought leaders. We're supposed to be helping drive us forward as futurists, right? So if we're the ones sitting here going, dear, oh no, what if my job changes? What if my cheese is moved? Well, then we should get out of the way and let somebody who's actually willing to drive the future to kind of take that from us.
But granted, it sounds very. I used to say there's this, and the I or the yay sayers, and then the naysayers on the other side, right? And you definitely put yourself on the first side of the aisle, right? So basically, definitely on the I love this, and let's dive into the opportunities. But don't you think that people feel the horse thing is you can see the car, right? It's a thing. It's there. Okay, some of the cart makers will have another job. Actually, the first automobiles were created by cart makers as well in wood and all that, right? So there was some continuity. But here we're looking at something that is on the surface level, promising to change everything that works on language, which is honestly a lot of the things that we do. So it's not just this car thing out there. I can see it and then move away from it. It's like everything, everywhere, right? It's also on my social media. It's everywhere I look, right? The anxiety around that, um, and then I think saying that there's also this weird thing of looking at it, right? um, and at the same time saying, "Oh, it's there," and then going back to working in Excel or having trouble doing my time station, right? Or I have to do the dishes, right? And all the it's like it's still like it's even like it's to get where I'm going. So, but
I do, but I mean, don't you think it felt the same to somebody who had all they've ever known is taking care of their horse, and that's so key to the family's ability to get around. Like, I can't even imagine a world where I have to go to what's a gas station. They don't exist yet, right? So there's like this entire ecosystem that you don't understand when you're in the middle of the change. But once the change is retrospective and you're thinking about the change, you can see it all and it looks a lot more clear. I just think we're in that earlier part of navigating what the new normal is going to be without necessarily knowing.
So this, what are you going to say to people then? Because you need to have to substitute something. You need to know what to substitute it for. What should architects substitute for? That it's easy to say, oh, you're going to be replaced with someone with AI. Okay, but what am I going to do with AI? How am I going to change my life? That's a good question, I think.
Well, I think it's a fair question, but that's the same challenge we navigate in architecture for any other challenge, which is trying to walk through ambiguity, right? Like, we don't know. They don't know. Nobody knows, right? Yeah. So what do? Well, you take one bite of the elephant and you go, well, certainly RAG-assisted search is better than not RAG-assisted search. So why don't we start there, right? What are some of the information assets we need to curate? Do a heat map, right? Understand what are the most critical sources, domains of information. What are the subdomains? Map that to your key projects, your key programs, your key strategic initiatives. That last one's the most important. What data do we need to have that we don't have today that's going to drive us in that strategic initiative? Okay, well, let's curate that. Let's master that. Let's get the quality up on that. And now we can build AI products. We can build other data products on top of that. So to me, it's about readiness and understanding where the biggest plays are and focusing on getting those parts of the information architecture, those parts of the technical architecture ready to be transformed, and then watching the innovation curves and where something is not necessarily competitive advantage, but it's better than what we're doing today. Ride the wave, right? Get a surfboard, whatever's coming out in the next release, start to apply it, but stay loosely coupled because there's a wave behind this wave and it's moving a lot faster than we have in the past. So you don't want to put in permanent coupling to any particular new tech in this space. You want to be able to sub it in and out. Okay, cool. Now you're at least kind of moving forward with the market, but there's going to be moments where there's no yet visible wave on the horizon that's going to solve the problem. So you have to go, okay, well, is there a competitive differentiation to my company, to the capabilities we're trying to create for me to get there first? And if there is, great. So maybe let's look at this back a few months, even a year. So fine tuning and trying to start to create a bit of an asset that can sort of refine the outcome of a RAG search or a chatbot. You use this voice. You might have had to customize that. You might have had to do some prompt engineering to be able to get a particular, like a marketing engine that uses the voice of a particular style. Cool. Okay, that made sense. It was competitive advantage at the time. But now, really, how much do you have to be a prompt engineering master? How much do you have to do tuning with Strawberry and some of the new innovations? Those things are starting to kind of become commoditized. So rip those out, put back in the industry platforms, and start to build custom and configure where the next sort of business driving competitive differentiation is coming. So that's how I kind of focus on it. So it's not so much give me the answers of everything that we're going to have different in our lives in 5-10 years. It's what are we going to do this year? How can this technology enable our goals? And let's iteratively think about how we were going to go after this and how we can pragmatically apply that technology to get better outcomes for the organization.
But Andrew, you're actually answering my first question, right? So it doesn't sound like we're going to need less architects.
No, you're not. And here's the thing, architects, when do you need a bunch of architects? All the time, right? Of course, we're awesome. No, you need a bunch of architects when you have change. If you were going to make the same Bic pen forever, you don't need a bunch of architects. You need a bunch of people that are great at operational excellence that will make that Bic pen faster, cheaper, higher quality, right? They're just optimizing the existing. When you want to navigate change, you need people that are great at cutting through ambiguity and getting people clarity on what's next.
Yeah.
With so much change happening in the innovation space with AI, you need more folks that can disambiguate, and that's what architects do. So am I losing sleep? No, because actually I think that the architect role is going to be more critical as we navigate this change. And I don't think we're going to see much of a let up here. I think the pace of innovation is only accelerating. And that means the need to dissect and understand and localize and apply that innovation into our business is going to continue to be an important skill.
Yeah, but the complexity keeps increasing, right? As well, right? We with all the change going on there. So I said the other day to someone that we're all going to be middle managers in the future to some extent with all agents and all that. But are we actually every one of us going to be architects in the future? Is that what you're saying, Grant?
I think we all need to be understanding the strategic positioning of our space, right? I think there's an element of forward thinking that we all should carry. I think there's an element of not just understanding how you're going to tile and how you're going to outfit a kitchen, but structurally how you built that out. That as you want to knock down a 2-car garage and build a 3-car garage, whatever element of your scope is going to have structural change, you're going to have to take an architectural mindset to it. So it's only when you have large scale that's effectively, you need like a full-time role focused on that type of change. But it's really only the top 30% of an organization's work that requires an architecture review. And of that, only the top
right
10%
now, right?
Go super deep, right?
What in the future if the flux moves on and there's more AI and AI agent? Just the idea that this could increase, right? The 30% could increase to be 40, 50, 60.
I don't know. It doesn't though. So that's the thing. Just look at it this way. There's always a 30% of most impactful, most change, most transformation for an organization. And then beneath that line, for the organization to be effective, you have to have enough change agility in the leaders of each domain, of each area, to manage that change in their own space. And they're going to have, instead of enterprise architects, they're going to have technical architects, solution architects, business architects local to that domain that do their sort of 70%. And then, 30%. And then the remaining 70% might go down to a technical lead that has to disambiguate the top 30% of theirs. So there's going to be a sort of layering of significance. And if you think everything's changing and everything requires a super thought through detailed architecture, you're going to get stuck in sort of this perfection mindset and fear mindset, control mindset of trying to have everything perfect. I think it's got to really be tiered and triaged at each altitude, regardless of if we're seeing the pace of change in AI or if it was a few years back in cloud and data. Right? This isn't the first time we've seen massive level change. And the number one thing you have to be able to do is figure out what's important to drive our business and to be able to find the critical few that need the deeper dive at each altitude.
Well, I think, and I've mentioned this theater multiple times on the podcast. The innovation theater. Thor Dankert mentioned it the first time. I also speak to Carl Friston and many more about it. Is that what you're talking about? Having some people doing some innovation over here, or thinking architectural thoughts about how could the world look. I think Carl Friston's response to that was that everyone needs to be involved in the change. Every employee needs to be involved to expand the way the organization thinks, right? But that's not what you're saying.
I think it's like in the neighborhood, like if what I was talking about, we're still in the same zip code, certainly maybe
Mm,
even the same area code and what we're talking about, but there are some nuances to it. Like there's innovation teams, like look at it this way. Um, one group might be responsible for a particular domain, like cloud or
mm,
data or whatever. And within that domain, let's say cloud, there could be new capabilities that help now instead of just using um, CI/CD tool chain and provisioning. There might be like AI tools we can plug into that ecosystem and reduce kind of what you would call in lean mindset waste, right?
mm,
Non-value adding things to the customer, like, can you get me my machine quicker? That's all that matters to me. And if AI or something else can speed that up, great. So there's innovation happening in their area, looking at that particular space and what could be applied. And then there's another kind of space around the business is moving in this way, and where can we enable our customers to get better outcomes, and how does that relate with the company's imperatives to grow share, to drive innovation in their products and services, etc. So these worlds combine when you start to look at the business imperative, business strategy decomposition, and then the areas we're going to invest, and you go, great, we're going to invest and we're going to move these things forward. Well, one of them is going to touch cloud. Great. Check it out. When we get to the cloud space, there's an opportunity that we're touching this space anyway to invest in the roadmap that they've drawn to
mm.
bring their capabilities into more of a strategic implementation that leverages AI. So we'll do that while we're addressing the business imperative. Another group, let's just randomly put them in in like master data management. They have an idea that can help with mastering the data in a better and more effective way. Great. It's in their roadmap. But this particular business imperative isn't going to use that. Well, then
Mm.
this isn't the one that's going to be the wave that's rolling, and they can surf to improve their MDM capability. They're going to wait for the next one to come that's going to touch that space, and then we'll leverage the innovation that the MDM team has come up with.
And
Um,
the funny thing is, everything you're saying, everything you've almost been saying so far, right, Grant? It's been like complexity. There's the complexity rules, sovereign almost. There's so many different domains, so many different areas, so many different specialities, so many different things you need to map up and understand and sub in and out and all that, right? Uh, uh, and still, I heard people saying that, in the future we're going to be more and more fluid. Everyone's going to be working across everything. We're going to have agents that can do everything across the entire field, and it just seems contrary to what you're saying, right? So for me, what you're saying is my usual understanding, right? That we increase the complexity at every step. To some extent, we've done that all the time. Humanity, we have solved things, so we don't have to worry about food, but it doesn't mean the world has gotten more simple. It's just gotten less, dangerous or something like that. But it's extremely complex, right? So what do you think? Are we going to have a more complex world in the future? Or are we going
we're
to have a
always going to
simpler
have a
one?
more complex world. I mean, like we've been using the car metaphor, right? Do you need to know how rack and pinion steering works? No, but
Mm.
you know how to need to change. You do need to know how to check your tires pressure
Yeah, yeah. And
and
I
is it
read
oil
I read John
changes.
Steinbeck. You read Steinbeck, right? Everyone in those books can always fix every engine. I don't think everyone can fix an engine today.
Exactly. Exactly. It's more complex, right? But what do
Mm,
you need to know at the altitude you're operating in society for any particular thing? Certain levels of detail get obfuscated depending on where you're engaging in the value chain.
mm,
So that's always the case. And I think that both things can be true. That's the thing. It's not that um, the two things we're saying are at odds with one another. I believe we will iteratively improve our capabilities by function, by technical domain as business needs come in. As we have IT for IT needs, we're going to invest to move closer to what we're defining as the strategic path for every space. And as we do that work, we will start to introduce agents, and we will start to introduce things that cross the Purdue model and close gaps that we have today between the manufacturing floor and the ERP. And over time, we will look back at this moment and go, well, look at that. We've actually implemented agents across our ecosystem that do these various things, and agent orchestration that helps bring those things all together. But we didn't get there overnight, and we didn't get there by just deleting our whole organization and rebuilding it as an agent-centric organization. We got there by iteratively addressing business needs with the innovation we're finding across our organization opportunistically as it drives outcomes for our businesses.
But let me just let me ask you a little bit more subtle here, because what I'm actually asking about or getting at here is this a death of specialization? Is this death of division of labor? We will do multiple things because AI fix will fix everything that is specific, right? They'll know the specifics, and we'll just be hovering above and being everywhere all at once. Knowing. But can we even do that, right? The point is, I want to know what do you think? Actually, do you think that we will still be specialized in the future, maybe even more so or less so? And because if we're going to be more so, then we're going to be managing individual bots that are specialized, and we're still specialized ourselves to be able to know if the outcome of the bot is actually a good outcome. And then I think Kurt Kegel on my podcast said that. Then no, he wrote it in a post on LinkedIn that he didn't like the self-driving car because he thought it's a sort of a hoax because you still have to sit in the car. So you're still sitting there. Why can't you just drive it? The
Because you could be
efficiency
doing other
gain is so
stuff,
small.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
you could be
yeah. But the
actually
efficiency
texting
gain
and driving in a
is
safe way.
small, right? He said it's just small because you're still sitting there looking and being sure it's all working, right? I don't know.
Kind of took me on an adventure there.
Yeah, I did. But I'm just,
Yeah.
the death of specialization.
So
I
here's
think
the thing,
it's an
right?
interesting discussion, right? Because you work on complexity. Architects work on this complexity thing. You go to I don't know, some green crappy field or a brown field that's even crazier. Figure out what can we do with this space, right?
Well, I think an architect's job is to make the complex simple,
Mm,
right? Our job is to make things zoomed out so that we can see the bigger picture where it makes the most sense, where the clarity is useful to driving outcomes,
mm,
and to solve the big problems while they're still little.
mm,
So, right, like if we start to go down a road and we're already committed to 5 or 6 different ways of solving a problem, it's too late to reverse and find this common holistic approach. But if architecture can help find, hey, we're going to solve this, let's just take a simple one that would looking back makes sense. We're going to build chatbots. Okay, great. Well, do we need to have every single different chatbot in the market out there? We're going to use Llama, we're going to use Gemini, we're going to use, maybe, but we probably could have loose coupling and a central architecture approach that things come in before they go off to an LLM and come back and process to a customer. So if you tried to solve that later after you've already implemented 5 or 6 of these, you've got a challenge. But if you realize there's some common parts of the architecture around prompt goes in, around optimization of the query, right? And even kind of any fine tuning you might do before you push it to the LLM and back, and how it's checked for safety before it's returned,
mm,
right? So I guess, but I really want to also go to the point you mentioned earlier around this increase of complexity and specialization. So of course we're going to keep specializing. When in the history of the world has that not been the case? When I was growing up, I wanted to be a computer guy. That's what people would ask. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a computer guy. Great. I mean, I was running an Apple II GS,
yeah.
right? And I was having a great time with it. And that was a profession. Now it's like, yeah, computer guy. What kind?
But
There's
exactly.
there's millions. There's
But,
billions.
but what if we
Perhaps
then
even.
what if we then add, an AI agent that can be all of the computer guys you need, right? My question, my answer will always be, we would need to still be able to validate if the AI agent that can be anything is actually doing a good job.
Well, there's pieces to this where that matters, and there's pieces where it doesn't.
Mm,
So if there is feedback available to the machine learning, like if the product passes a quality test at a later point in the manufacturing line, then we can conclude that our mixture of temperature, pressure, speed, and ingredients, and when they're added, was optimized. And if that's worse, then the machine learning gets feedback. So
Mm,
I don't actually need a human to sit there other than, did we provide the right measures? Now your job is to give the machine learning algorithm the right inputs so it can optimize correctly, as opposed to focusing on doing that work yourself. That's a
mm,
good example of that, right? So that's how I see the pivot is still have jobs to do, and now you're specialized in understanding what outcomes matter to the consumer that we can measure on the line, that will give the machine feedback that will help us make better product at better
mm.
speed.
I don't think I should maybe explain my thinking and why I think this is such an important question, actually, because
Okay,
I'll just do that. but
go
the,
go
but
for it.
but the point no, but the point is that I think that we've come from a world where we have processes and humans at the center of processes, where we do all the things and we connect all the dots, and then we approach systems and applications functionalistically ad hoc. We go to them and they perform a task, then we go back, do our processing, we decide what happens from a human centric process way of doing things. And in the future, with open architectures, software systems, and AI, they will be running things, and humans will be on the edge to some extent, right? And we will be the ones that will be called upon functionalistically to handle things that the AI systematic approach can't do. So that's the transition I think society is going through. But that also means that there is a different, from human at the center to human at the edge, there's a completely different skill set we need. There's a completely different mindset. There's also some kind of change management. We did that for humans when they had to adopt machines. Now, do we need to do change management for machines when they approach humans? Or there's a lot of questions I'm having at the moment, right? Yeah, and
I
you
can
look
see
you look
that.
you look weird, right? But it's like, whoa,
I
what
always
is
look
like?
weird.
No, no, that's not what I meant. But you looked puzzled at what I said. So my question is,
Well, change management for robots.
that's
Like
weird, right? That's a weird thing, right? But what would that be?
I think it's a very different thing. We're talking about change management for feedback or for robots. It just means variables that are optimized. It doesn't mean that the robot has feelings, right? Like
No,
you can't teach an AI to have a broken heart. It will never know what that
no.
is, right? So, in the same way, change management for robots is not something where we have pride and ego. We just simply have a rut
But
of
you still have
data and
biases, right?
reinforced learning
Yeah,
that we
but we
have to
still have
pull it out of.
biases, right? We still have biases that needs to change as well. There's some things, and some things are different. I'm just trying to get my head around what could be the difference, but also saying, does the human on the edge need to be as specialized as they used to be in the middle, or do they need to be even more specialized? Because now
I
there will
don't think
be
the
an
human's ever on the edge. So we might disagree on that. I
okay, good, good,
believe,
good, good, good.
yeah, I believe that the human is everywhere all the time.
Mm.
I think there's problems that lose relevance to humans where a machine can do it better. Just like we no longer slam rail spikes into the ground by a human, there's machines that can do that more effectively. We're going to find the same, but that doesn't mean that humans are on the edge of designing our transportation systems. They're everywhere,
Mm.
right? So there's certain jobs and tasks and activities that are no longer human manpower, but there's still human brain power. There's still
Everywhere in the
collaboration.
mix,
Right.
everywhere all the
So,
time, right?
and
Yeah.
I mean, I look at that, we might say that, well, because I'm not physically provisioning you a server these days, I'm on the edge. I don't think so. I think the fact that we have to build the CI/CD pipeline and that we have to provide the automated provisioning mechanisms, we're still in the mix, even in this automation and virtualization of hardware delivery. So
But you get my point, right? So if you have a system like that, then it will tell you, Grant, I need the client that asked for this one. I'm supposed to ask you when he asked for this kind of server. So now I'm giving you, approval. Please approve this request or whatever. So this is where humans become a functionalistic ad hoc thing that the system reaches out to. But of course, you're right in designing and demand and what do we want from our solutions. Humans will always lead. I believe that very much. I think I've quoted the Bible often on that, actually saying that we give name and value to things, right? But that doesn't mean necessarily that we will always be the ones, at the center of the performance of things, right? That is where I think there's a difference, don't you think? I'm pulling you far out here in multiple different directions, Grant.
No, I'm just like trying to find myself in the landscape you're painting and
Mm,
figuring out what, like, to me, tasks being automated, tasks being transferred to a different delivery mechanism don't inherently put me on the edge. I think there's also ecosystem wide changes where entire roles may no longer be relevant. Um, maybe if we go to farming,
mm,
and how tractors can in fact drive themselves in planting and harvesting these days, with the GPS systems and
mm,
the
mm,
amazing advancements in that, right? So we're disrupting that industry. Would you still think that farmers are on the edge in that world? I wouldn't. I'd say the farmer still owns the land. They have to buy the seeds, they get them into the ground, they decide strategically what to plant, right? And they just simply might have different workforce management around how they actually have to deliver uh, produce to the
mm,
work.
mm.
I don't put the person on the edge now. They still own their farm,
Have you seen
right? And
these semi-autonomous? No, these not autonomous, but these self-service checkouts at supermarkets, right? Where you can, and then if there's a problem, there's a staff being called, right? And then he comes and helps you. But in uh, in essence, the system serves you without a human in the loop, except if there's a
I get
problem.
where you're going. I guess my point is a human still owns that grocery store.
Yeah, but I completely agree with that, the demand side. But the whole processing of things we're doing, systems will be running that and we'll be called upon, right? You'll be called to fix the register if something's wrong in the supermarket. You'll be
Right. The
called to
jobs are
fix the
different.
you'll be called to fix the tractor. How do we design that? How specialized do you need to be? Was my initial question to discover to sort of explore that small dimension, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, how specialized do
No,
you need
it's
to
fine. It's good.
be a human
So
on the edge or a human to be called for? Do you need to know everything that's going on? Do you need
no,
to be as
you
good
need
as
to
you
be
used to be?
you need to be specialized in the areas that are competitively differentiating.
Hmm.
So it's on each of us to skill ourselves up in a way that is going to be high demand, high value in the future market, in the future
Yeah.
labor market.
So
So
so not
if you
5.
become an expert in horseshoe making in the horse economy, you've chosen the wrong thing, right? Um,
But there's still room for one very specialized horseshoe maker because there's still some
right,
people who
yeah,
like
for the
horses. So
racehorses
yeah,
and Conberry Downs, right? If you're the best in the world of anything, there's almost always a place for you. But the ability for that to maintain relevance, in mass is we understand that the world continuously changes. So to
but
me,
yeah. I'm just
yeah,
thinking. I'm thinking while we're talking here, so that's why it's moving. Sorry about that, but it's just this whole supermarket cashier thing. Oh, what is are they called? That clerks? What do you call them? Supermarket people beeping beep beep. What do you call those, Grant?
you can call them anything. I mean, cashier,
Cashier. So
right?
but 10 years ago we had 10 cashiers at this supermarket. Now tomorrow we'll have one, but he has to know everything if something goes wrong. So you have one super specialized person instead of having 10. It's more efficient, but it's even more specialized. Is that where we're landing?
It's different. Like, again, this is where we might disagree. So
Mhm.
I believe that the person who's managing all the self checkout kiosks has different things that they have to know how to do. They used to have to know what code to push, how to
Mm.
weigh the fruit, right? How to pack things so that the eggs weren't on the bottom of the bag. These were important skills in the manual cashier checkout bagging, delivery. Now, what matters is checking an ID for alcohol purchases, understanding how to deal with
Mm.
maybe like a walk off or somebody kind of leaving mid transaction.
Control
So,
and
like,
compliance. Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
it's different higher
Mm.
order tasks that are now important because the weighing and the bagging is now either managed by the customer or the machine, but you have new tasks you have to learn. So it's just a
That are
higher
higher
order.
value tasks, right? That's the point. That's what I call higher special. I think this is a brilliant conversation, Grant, and I love that you're going there with me. Sorry, sorry, I'm forcing you to go there with me.
We're going are together. This is the only constant.
It is.
The only constant of this show is that you're going to take us weird places.
Oh yeah, that's right. I have said that before. I'm not. I don't know if I want to say it on the show, but the only constant is me.
Right. Exactly.
So, but it's also exploring. So I love this because it's actually something I'm thinking. I'm thinking a lot about this recently, and I think it's brilliant to just pick your brain on it here on the show as well. So, but you run the Chief Architect Network, Grant. So you know a lot of chief architects, and you have a really broad what do you call it footprint among these people. So you talk to them all the time. You're not just sitting somewhere in a silo being a hyper specialized guy. You're actually being a generalized hyper specialized guy. How can you be that anyway? But maybe that's what you are. So how is the community, the Chief Architect Network? How is that responding to generative AI in general?
Well, it's fascinating. I think as of today, we have about 220 of our 400 plus members that have opted in to learn about AI. And it's very interesting. The network has different topics they can choose, vote with their feet. What do you want to be invited to talk about? And I find the areas that folks want to talk about are the areas that are under the biggest amount of change, which makes sense because architects help to drive change, to understand it, localize it, and help organizations execute in moments of change. So, of our 200 folks, we find that it's also one of the most active conversations, as you might expect, and also has the biggest demand. So one of the kind of fun things we have going on in this space is Matthew Basagi, a presidential innovation fellow from the White House, has joined our network and is co-leading the AI topic with me. And this is super fun because rather than just simply coming together and understanding what we each need in our own little puzzle piece to take back to our organization, it gives us a higher purpose that we might be able to help the office of the White House and the government figure out from our voice of industry, like how to cast and craft policy, how to drive innovation, where to potentially invest that's going to make a difference to the private and public sector. And I think it's an amazing thing that gives us a purpose that all of our voices can contribute to something that's going to advance society. So it's kind of gone from a really great place where I could learn from Microsoft leaders and some of the other big hyperscalers sharing with us as architect peers what they're building in their organization. Not so much like a sales pitch; it's a selling free environment, but this is how the technology is taking shape for us to get smart. And I saw this happen in one of my previous employers where I learned a lot in the Chief Architect Network calls. And then they had hired some high-level consultants from the board to figure out how to go after AI in the organization. So they are interviewing people. They find me and, boy, look at that. I know a lot of the answers. Well, why do I know a lot of the answers? Because of who I'm speaking with the network. So they're like, we should put Grant in charge of helping us kind of shape this initiative. So it created a lot of opportunity for me to create kind of the industry or to localize the industry approach for my previous employer and take forward what I've been learning from my peers. And it cut out the sort of the innovation delay where great things are coming and maybe the technical leaders inside some of the hyperscalers can talk to it, but their sales teams are still learning it, right? So it was very interesting when I'd come out of that meeting and I'd ask my sales team, hey, let's go on this. I understand it's an available feature. They go, we have to learn about it. We didn't even know that was there. So that's one of the advantages is really closing the gap between the innovation happening in the market, our ability to adopt it, and our ability to understand how it all connects so that we can be pushing the ball forward for our organizations when maybe the whole machine isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, so a community or a network built to sort of keep up initially, maybe we get be fast followers all the time, closing the gap all the time, and now you're suddenly asked to speak with the White House about how to direct the future. Is that what you're saying?
And I don't want to overstate it. Like, think of it this way: the White House has presidential innovation fellows. We have one of them that's a member of our group, and I've asked him to co-lead the network with me. And now I can put the whole network to service for the White House.
Yeah.
So think of it that way: is I'm providing the White House a way to access 408 of my peers and segment that by industry, segment that by geography as it makes sense to get the insight they need to drive outcomes for the nation state, right? So that's a pretty cool thing because ultimately, if the United States advances that capability, the whole world benefits.
But it's also really cool that you have the ability to spread the word this quickly, right? And that's also to some extent what the podcast is all about: figuring out what's going on, what are people doing, how are people thinking about it, making sure all the listeners can advance their understanding quickly and close some gaps, even though they're sitting alone and maybe not have access to the kind of peer networks that you're currently engaged in. Now they can hear from Grant how he's thinking about things. But
Well, just on
what
that
are
last
you?
piece, though, like
What?
that's part of the point. Just like your podcast, we have a podcast as
Mm,
well, and we also have a lot of public events because
mm,
it's yeah, we need some space just for the leaders to collaborate, but then we want to get out and share the message. So we have public events. We do them in person in different cities as well as online that try to help to share the knowledge that the network is creating with the broader profession because it's important. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and
mm.
our objectives are really around learning as an organization for ourselves, and then sharing that knowledge with industry so we can advance as a general profession.
So what are the big takeaways from the network, Grant? What are you telling society to do?
Well, at the moment,
Let's
it's
close the
really
gap for
about
everyone. Now is the closing the gap moment,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. At the moment, it's really around this is a race, right?
Mm,
And I believe that the people that own AI, there's a quote I can't remember who, but the the nations that have figured out how to adopt AI are going to be the market leaders in the future.
mm.
So we have a responsibility to drive that change and to be a part of the adoption so that we aren't um, sort of behind as a country, behind as a company, et cetera. So um, I think there's a lot of value there. I got lost in the question though. Could you give me it one more time?
No, but the question was just, simply what is it that we're gonna do and how we're gonna lead into the future? How do we close the gap? What are the key takeaways from the network right now on AI? What are you advising if you want to advise the White House? No, or no, whatever. What if you want to advise society? What are you saying, Grant? What do you think is right now top of your
It's
mind?
zoom out and get simple with it, right? Figure out whatever your space is. How can AI help? Right,
Mm.
driving business value, driving
And that is the
efficiency.
discussion right now, isn't it, Grant? Sorry. You said also nations before, right? Figuring out. I can't help but we're sitting here, just on the back of the DeepSeek announcements and all that. You've probably also had your feet filled with it, right? And suddenly AI, and this is my point from it. Suddenly AI became aggressively commoditized, right? Does it even matter anymore? Anyone with I don't know a couple of people and the server can build an AI model apparently as good as OpenAI. So, but give or
The,
take.
things aren't always as easy as they or as simple as they appear,
No, no,
right?
but what is the
Like
task then?
DeepSeek is a couple things. One, yeah, there's significant advancement in the capability,
Mm,
but it's also China saying this is our big move to
mm,
show themselves as a leader in
mm,
the AI space, right? And I think this is a moment where they've shown some innovation, they've shown what's possible, and they've done it in a way that others can engage in an open model versus a closed model. However, the game isn't over just because of one frog leap, right? This is still an iterative process, and it, the game is still on. And we're not done. AI capability is not okay. Cool. DeepSeek solved it all. We can all go back to our desks, and that was
No,
fun.
no, no,
No,
that's not my point. My point is just more, isn't it all right now about, architecting how we want things to interact then and touch the things that is actually going on in the world, right? I always say that the world is the, brownfield. There's a brownfield out there, right? It's not greenfield. It's not just we build things from now on with AI. How getting things attached to it. I think the discussion right now when is that we've done with the amazement of the hammer, right? Everyone has a hammer now. Everyone can build a hammer, so what do you want to do with it? What do you want to do with it? Isn't that the big question now, Grant?
I mean, at the risk of repeating myself, I feel like We have a hammer. The tendency is to go look for nails.
Mm,
I instead say put the hammer back in the toolbox and go solve problems and figure out when you need a hammer, a screwdriver, a nail gun, whatever,
mm,
right? Like, um, this is one tool and life has not materially changed. We are still trying to provide the capabilities that are differentiating for our organization to drive business value. Like,
mm,
we can't get confused and think that our job is different than that. That's still our job.
mm,
So, within that scope, how does the tool of AI help us achieve that outcome with whatever scope we own, um, and apply it where it makes sense? But we still have the RFID compared to barcode problems.
mm,
If you've never had an inventory management system at all, and been walking around with a clipboard down your rows in your warehouse, an RFID system is going to have an amazing ROI. You're going to go, wow, look at this. But you had to print 5 to 25-cent RFID tags for every piece of inventory that you want to run through that thing. A barcode is pennies, right? If
mm,
not even a full penny. So while your ROI was tremendous in implementing RFID, what was your ROI just to put on barcodes?
mm,
It was even higher. So the same is true as you look at AI or any other innovative capability or technology. Is you have to pragmatically look at, is that going to be the most effective, efficient way to deliver? Or just because you've had a gap and this is the newest thing, we should use the newest thing. Not necessarily, because there's a lot of processing cost. As you might be aware, one of the topics I absolutely love talking about is the sustainability impact of AI, right? How
mm,
much power is being consumed, how much water is being used. As a person who works in a sustainability company, Ecolab, that's a very important topic.
mm.
If you're just using AI for any problem you can throw at it, there's a lot of extra processing cost. There's probably a lot of additional consumption cost with tokens and some of the other ways we pay for this, that ultimately you could be doing more harm than good in picking the new shiny toy.
Mm.
So, like, I think it's important that we just remain focused on outcomes and look at all the things available to us to achieve them, AI being one of them.
So yeah, I've mentioned this also on the episodes before that we've had boards saying we need 5 or 4, 6, 7 counting AI projects next year. So my next question for you would be, what are your greatest fear? And I think you already sort of alluded to it for enterprises. If we look 5 years ahead, what are the fault lines right now? What are they doing?
Clowns. Clowns are my greatest fear. No, they don't actually. I'm not afraid of clowns, but I don't spend a lot of time in fear. I
No,
think that fear is a um is if you're sitting in fear, you're not doing your best work.
no. But what if
Um,
you're not? What if companies are not putting the hammer back in the toolbox, but are just running around with hammers everywhere? Right, and how could the world look if if the world doesn't follow your advice? Because there are tendencies they won't do that. How will we look in 5 years? What will be
Oh,
the
don't
task?
worry. Don't worry. The companies that run around with a hammer and don't ensure that they're not slamming that into screws, they are going to have suboptimal outcomes. And what happens when that happens? Well, they're not as profitable. The market doesn't reward that behavior. Then they have to explain to their board why they invested tens and hundreds of millions of dollars in something that didn't provide any value. So ultimately, the incentive systems that we work in our free market are going to reward the people that responsibly invest and punish the people that don't. And just like there's sort of this really funny picture that had like this massive people, and they hit this crossroad point where one sign said simple and wrong, and the other sign said complex but correct. And
Mm,
there's like a bookshelf as you kind of walk down the complex and correct. So there's just a sea of lemmings going left, right?
yeah.
Like the easy strategy, easy button. And there's just a couple people on the lonely road. That's what I think is we're seeing when we saw cloud migrations. How many people just did lift and shifts, and now they're paying? They didn't transform before they modernized, and now they're paying the price of higher cost to
Mm,
operate, and potentially even more locked in to legacy infrastructure designs, even though they're in a modern infrastructure container. Um, so It's just,
Well, why do they do that, right, Grant? So why do companies do that? Because most of these companies definitely had architects, right? Did they just not listen to them, or what happened? What do you think happened?
well, it usually comes from fear. Um, it comes from somebody saying we're going to do this at the right altitude, and either they are not willing to accept anything other than what they've said is the direction. Like, we're going to move all of our workloads from here to cloud, and we're going to spend this amount by this date. So now you're looking at this problem
Mm,
going, well, we are going to be spending that amount of millions of dollars a month in cloud on that date. So I need to fill that bucket. Now my problem isn't how do I enable the business in X, Y, or Z? It's within the constraints of we will be at this level of consumption, whether we use it or not by this date. Well, I better make that consumption provide as much cost relief to the old legacy infrastructure that I was running.
mm,
So now I'm optimizing for not an ROI problem, I'm just optimizing for cost avoidance.
mm, mm.
So while it was the wrong thing was done at this altitude without the ability to change, so now the whole company is optimizing what will be shareholder value given that constraint.
So
So,
more specialization again. Listen to the specialists.
well, I believe in domain driven design. So
Yeah.
what you do is you have a problem and you go, great, who's the expert in cloud? Who's the expert in security? Who's the expert in this? Do we not have an expert in AI? Bring in an external person who
Mm,
can play that role with the person who's going to learn it internally. We have two in a box. We handle that. We bring this team together. They all own their particular space, bring in their subject matter experts. And then architecture plays the role of helping each of those domains puzzle piece their part of the solution into a comprehensive design. Now, that works great when you have clarity. We're going to
mm,
build this, and then, okay, we're going to go build that out. Sometimes you have to make a big bet. Sometimes you have to say, we're going to dramatically change where we're going. And that could be, we're going to migrate to cloud by
mm.
X date at X level.
You sound like you've
Um,
tried this migrate to cloud scenario.
yeah, I've lived this at many companies. And generally, the mandates at that altitude are ineffective, but they do cause um, a pivot to start to happen that couldn't happen at the same rate of change. And if done correctly, it can create a sort of a rebuild of the infrastructure of the foundation
Yeah, 'cause
that allows the
there's a
company to
pressure that
pivot,
moves you
right?
forward, right? Yeah, exactly. So
But so many of these programs you see repatriation, you
mm,
see sort of reversing a lot of these because they they were incorrect in their assumptions around how quickly the company could adapt and how the workloads that were the easiest to move were the least value, and the
mm.
workloads that were the hardest to move um, were actually causing anchoring in the legacy costs. So we can't get out of the data center if this thing's still running in it.
Sounds like
So
AI problems, everything you're saying here.
what's that?
Sounds like AI problems. So you fix the things that are easy but non-valuable, and the things that are difficult, you end up having dual setups, right? The same thing could happen in an AI adoption cycle, right? The same
That's
thing.
exactly why I brought it up, right?
Yeah.
If the cloud story is just the horse and car story that's a
Mm,
little closer to us in the technology domain, we're going to see the same thing. People are going to have AI mandates. We're going to do all of this in this technology by this date. And some of them are going to make sense and some of them aren't.
mm.
And I think the answer is kind of a blend. In the areas where you can make a strategic bet, you should, where there's clear alignment from business strategy at the highest level to a pivot, great. But then I would try to get out of that high level altitude, big bet space as quickly as you can into how you're going to compose that with
Mm.
things that tie directly to business strategy. And
Friction. Yeah.
right, if you can't do that, you're probably going to find yourself in the post migration cloud um, my cloud migration story just in AI, where you've
Mm.
made your big bet, you put a bunch of money in it, and the board's looking at you going, "Where's the ROI?" And that's
Yeah,
not a
no,
good
but I
position
also
to be
think that
in.
what you said, the high value stuff, it's always the difficult thing, right? It's so there's this everyone wants this to do real critical operations for them right now, AI especially, right? But can we even do this kind of fail fast that we need to do the approach that you sort of need to do also right now because AI is still so novel? Is that even a good approach to do? And you do critical processes, just see how let's try something out.
No, right? I mean, critical processes by definition, like I wouldn't bet the company. I wouldn't have my ERP just start to like hallucinate
Mm,
transactions. I think that would be more harm than help.
mm,
So, I mean, you have to have um, a risk measure and an impact measure and an effectiveness of the technology understood where you're going to affect the critical capabilities of an organization. I look at it as each domain understanding where their space is moving and figuring out how, if they were designing today, what their target would be, and based on where they are today, what's a reasonable target. I like to use the Google Maps metaphor. It doesn't worry about you missed a turn; it just tells you where your next turn is. Right.
that's a good one.
So,
Yeah.
based on where we're currently traveling, what makes sense within every leader's space and where they would go if they, in their particular path towards the destination. Great. And then we take the business problems that are landing and those areas that are going to be part of that story. Let's see if we can move them an inch closer to what their ideal state is.
Yeah, but it can't be, this agile necessarily everywhere. Just saying that let's try this out and make him MVP and see where we go and fail fast, right? That's also what you're saying very clearly here, isn't it?
Well, in a way, you can try out um, you can test, you can experiment without being in production,
Mm,
right? That's what digital twins are great for. You can do some scenario testing, you can try things out, you can build a mirror of your environment. Dev tests
yeah.
and production have existed forever, so it's not like you have to test in production. You can run the system parallel to the other system and see, did I actually get the right outcomes? Like a Coke Industries in Georgia Pacific has a thing called causal AI that helped them manage their order management and put the right inventory in the right trucks to get the best fill rate. So they have a fantastic story. It's on Forbes. It's worth
Mm.
looking up with Mike Carroll and Ron Norris and a few of these brilliant people over there, Tony Huffman being one of them. Um, so there's this great story around, okay, like instead of asking the AI something, the AI asks you, well, normally you would do this, but given we can get 10% more fill rate this week, if we break one of your rules, do you want to do that? And then it can learn from that.
Mm.
Well, cool. You could do that all as a side system while you still ran your manual processes to fill orders and prove that had you listened to the AI, your fill rate would have been X, Y, or Z, and then make the switch when the time is right. So I think there's the rules aren't changed. You still have to do solid development work. You still have to test before you put things in production. And ultimately, then if you're responsible around applying AI where the capability matches and calls for it, and that you've done the work to do the engineering and the testing to place it in, well, now you need to monitor it and make sure that it stays well behaved. But that's how you can kind of step your toe in the water and then gradually wade to deeper depths.
I think the gradual thing is really interesting, where the AI messaging is just so one-sided. This will just come in and disrupt. This is very much a disruption message, right? And I hear the opposite from you, right? I always quote Enzo Torres saying that God made the world in 7 days, but he didn't have an installed base. And I think there's this assumption that the whole world is being created anew with AI, but that's not what I'm hearing you say either. It's very much adopting and slowly changing brownfield architectures, isn't it?
We Electricity changed the world when it was introduced, and when it did, there were titles. I don't remember the exact thing. There's stories on this, like the director of electricity that would be a part of companies and organizations. It'd be sometimes reporting to the CEO,
Mm,
and We're seeing the same thing in AI today. Now, there's no directors of electricity, maybe except at some of our utility companies
Mm.
that exist today, right? So we kind of watch how that capability melts into the organization.
Yeah.
But at the time, because it was so disruptive, it was getting that high level attention. And we kind of watch how things move from sort of innovated pockets to centers of excellence, and then ultimately just become a part of the way we work. And I think we're finding that same evolution here. Nothing that's happening in this space to me is a change that we can't make a metaphor to something in the past, whether it's electricity or cloud. We've been down this kind of a magnitude of change
I
before.
I just had some master thesis students on a call last week who asked me, we want to write about some of the companies that's made big transformations with AI. Can you point us in the right direction? With Gen AI. And I was like, you can't find them yet. No one has really changed their entire business model yet. I know, but it just made me think. This is the messaging that people are hearing.
I
This
mean, that
is
isn't true.
upending, right?
That's
No, but
not true.
no.
So, like MIT, Brad Penaluti's lab
Mm,
has research, and it's published, where they were looking at some sort of specific muscle issue where they couldn't get the treatment to pass through a particular cell membrane to get the treatment into the nucleus and the other parts of the cell that needed it. So with AI, they were able to drastically improve the medical and pharmacy protein creation process to optimize what they should be doing, what they should be producing. And they took what could have been and it would have been years, or at
mm.
least it was years, down to months to develop and iterate on a cure that actually makes a huge difference for patients of this rare disease. Pardon me, I don't have the exact specifics, but that's incredible. And I
That's an
believe that
aggressive efficiency gain. What I'm thinking about is, a complete turnaround of value propositions, complete turnaround of business logics. I still think you were talking very much an efficiency productivity game, and we're not yet reinventing the wheel. But maybe
I mean,
there are some.
look at sound effects and audio, right? A lot of the creative space, creating an image, right?
Mm,
No, I mean those things have changed dramatically. If you were I'm not going to name the name of the company. I almost did, but there's a number of companies that sell, images, stock photos. I
mm.
imagine they've had a significant impact by what you can do by just going out to a lot of these AI tools and creating an image.
Yeah, we do.
Um,
We definitely have some companies
right?
suffering from that, right? Disrupted from that. But there was this, 20% productivity gain, on a whole. I haven't seen companies let go of 20% employees, right? I haven't seen that yet, right?
No, I
I've
mean,
seen
people have tried it
10%
and they
saved
hired
in
them right
a
back, and
customer service
that's
or
the
something.
point. We're not
Yeah.
we're not there, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that um, like David Guetta dropped Eminem clip in one of his sets, and Eminem never participated. He went to a website to get like how Eminem would say this particular thing.
Mm.
Then he went to another one that would generate the actual clip, and then he dropped it. Like that is transformative in the entertainment space, right? There's no royalty paid. There's no cameo fee, and it's like I think the disruption is happening. I mean, video, we're seeing it, right? So, does Cheerios still make Cheerios, or does General Mills still make Cheerios? Yeah. Are they still going to
Mm.
for the foreseeable future? Yes. But just because there isn't a tangible product that we buy at a supermarket doesn't mean that AI isn't already making significant disruptions in the industries that we're in.
I think it's making significant afterthoughts everywhere right now, and but I still think the tangibility of, layoffs or stop hirings or increase revenue just on the order of magnitude that was spoken about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, 2 years, right? 3 years ago, 2.5. Sorry, we're still not seeing that. I think there's still some delay, and I think that people are expecting that because they read those headlines and they've heard the David Guetta story, and they've heard about Klarna as well, right? By the way, and have we even heard the follow up story from Klarna? So, but the point is, are we? Is this there seems to be a noise, and there seems to be a lot of stories, but people are still doing their own time registration, right? And people are still doing the dishes, as I said earlier, right?
Yeah, there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but there's this idea. I think it was Amara's law, right? That we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and
Mm,
underestimate the effect of technology in the long run. It's
mm,
exactly what we're seeing here.
mm.
We expect the world to change tomorrow like that,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right? But we have no idea just how much is actually going to change over the 4 or 5, think about quantum, right? Quantum plus AI plus things like digital twins, like this stuff is massive in its potential implications that we haven't even really thought about. But we're sure next week our job's going away because AI is going to take it.
Mm,
So I really think that is very, very well in force here at the moment. And what we need to do is take a chill pill and figure out how we can support our business and where we're moving today and be ready that a couple years from now, the kinds of jobs we're doing might be very different, just like the cashier in the supermarket, compared to the person making sure all the self service kiosks are humming along and customers are able to check, bag, and exit with their groceries.
and we should have sort of expected that also before AI, right? That things would change, right?
And they're not going to stop. The
That
change is
is
going to be continuous.
the only constant from Heraclitus said the only constant is change, right?
Yeah,
And
that's the easy answer. I won't steal it, but I do think that is clearly going to be. I mean, you could say the speed of light is the only constant, but there's
it's
also multiple in the maths.
entropy, right? And also you also have, but Heraclitus also said, and I said this also before, that it doesn't just mean that everything changes. It also means that some things has to change to stay what they are, and then bring in, the red queen dynamics, as Carl Friston mentioned on the podcast, that you have to run as fast as you can to stay exactly where you are, right? That's the red queen from Alice in Wonderland, which represents Mother Nature. So she says that you have to keep on evolving if you don't want to die. And that's why she keeps saying "off with their heads," because she's killing everyone who's not. That's Mother Nature, right? She's a great mother, but just, but but you want to stay in place, you have to run as fast as you can, right?
I think there's a phrase I really like as well. Uh, what you may have heard. Well, it's the idea that what got us here keeps us here.
Mm,
I really believe in that, right? It's sort of everything that we're doing today, we are perfectly optimized to receive today's outcomes. So if we want something different, we have to change.
mm, true, but also I think sometimes there's value in just realizing that you might have a good idea now and a good technology, but you have to understand also what works today, because the companies you're going to implement it for, they have a value proposition, they have a supply chain, they have a whole productivity apparatus that works, and that's why they're able to call you in and help them change it. So have some respect, and then see how you can move that by understanding what's working. This whole conversation, right, between the brownfield and the new technology, I think that is the big challenge right now. That's also why I mentioned the deep seek thing, because for me it just means that, okay, now we're in commodity land. Let's stop talking about models. I actually don't care about models. I didn't even create an account with them until today. I was like, whatever, because that doesn't change anything. I still see people sitting around with Excel sheets, Word files, clicking away, right?
Yeah, what do they say? Flying cars by this time, and there would be no no need for brain scientists because everything would be diagnosed by AI. I mean, what do we have today? We have brain scientists driving in cars to work, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly.
I can't remember the exact
No, no,
quote, but
it's
it was
not. We don't have to drive your own car, and you won't have brain scientists. And today we just have brain scientists driving around in cars to work.
yep,
Yeah,
still there.
exactly. I love it. It's a brilliant one. It's one of my favorite ones, right? Grant, this has been a really, really brilliant chat. And I think it's been a chat that's been going. I think it's very seldom that it takes a lot of different directions. But I really loved it, and I love the way we could have a conversation around it and what it actually means to change. And I think there are some red lines in this conversation that goes around specialization, because I brought it up so many times, but also understanding what it means to change things, what it means to bring value into
Let's call it
organizations.
respecialization.
Let's definitely call that, or I don't know, deeper specialization. I don't know what we should call it. I need to still think about it.
But you're on the right thread. I mean, what we did today is not what we're going to do tomorrow. We have to find a way to specialize for tomorrow's needs,
Yeah, and
because
some things is
today we're
simple.
specialized for what we needed in the past, and that's again that whole what got us here keeps us here. We need to be able to figure out
Mm.
how we take advantage of this next wave.
So, but I've loved the conversation really, and I
Me
love
too.
all our exchanges, Grant. So, I only have a final question for you tonight today, and I don't know, are you ready for it?
I'm ready for it, man.
So, Grant, what is the only constant?
Well, as an architect, the only constant is trade-offs and technical debt and choosing that path forward that is optimized based on the constraints of where we are today and where we want to go. It's the only constant when it comes to architecture is there's always going to be something suboptimal that we already have we have to deal with. We don't have an infinite budget. We don't have infinite time. So we're going to pick a path that has something about it that isn't perfect. Or even if we're able to do everything we could dream of, the ball's going to move again. Today's brilliant, pristine, perfect, marquee flagship solution is tomorrow's dusty, cobweb filled disaster that we just can't wait to migrate away from. And so I guess that's a way of saying change is the only constant, except in the technology space. But truly, as we navigate change, understanding that there's always going to be a trade off and that we're going to have to focus on the things that are going to drive business value and the strongest case to ROI is going to always be the focus. And then we figure out how to optimize that with the future in mind. You know, there's certain places we can take a trade-off. We can say, okay, we'll take a little less ROI now to be a little bit more future ready. An example of that is loose coupling our solutions with the AI innovations that are coming in towards us. If we hard code into those things and think that we're just going to keep building on it like a building, that's probably going to be a little bit tough for us a year from now, 2 years from now, as we have all of these rigid solutions, right? So, my advice in the AI space is like invest to have less technical debt in the future by being loosely coupled and taking the innovations as a place you connect to and the things that are more stable in your organizations, like your ERPs and your CRMs, and hook up with more rigidity there.
Mhm.
But where this innovation curve is coming, be smart about it and know that today's beautiful solution is tomorrow's technical debt. So get ready for that because the innovation curve is much faster in AI by making these solutions sub-innovable, swappable, I'll say, and in our future architectures.
So, I think you wanted to say that the only constant is trade-offs because that sounds nice, but I actually think that you said the only constant is debt.
It's a glass full, glass empty, half full. You can decide what you are, but I think it's both, right? If it's empty and that there's going to be debt, it's full and that we're going to have to make smart trade-offs and we get to choose what those are and how do we make sure that we're getting the most value we can out of the water that's in the glass.
But you made me smile a lot while you said you're only constant. I really appreciate it, and it resonates tremendously with me. So I hope it'll also resonate the same way with the audience. Thank you so much for that, Grant, and thank you so much for being on The Only Constant today.
It's a pleasure, and I love what you do. Honestly, I think the world's best explained in a meme, and you picked some of the best I've seen. So I think telling a story is a big piece around what makes us effective, and it's been a lot of fun engaging with you online and in our personal engagements as well. I think if you can get people to laugh and see something in a simple message like that, it goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Grant. That's very nice of you to say. You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.